When I was a young boy, I would always go to the plaza or the town square to watch my late sister perform folk dance. And I thought, that is so beautiful. That is just so beautiful. I was just so drawn to that world. You could express yourself through dance, through movement. And so that was my aha moment as a young boy. As a person who's always been comfortable with my sexuality as a gay individual, I said I don't have to follow the tradition of doing sports, doing basketball. Number one, I don't have the height for it, but also I said, well, not that dancing is for gay people only. I'm not linking that, but what I'm saying is that there is an alternative to this very defined way of being a boy or being a male teenager in the Philippines. And I said, this is where I could be different and be happy and be good at. I wanted to be part of that world all the time, and folk dance was that for me. You know, gave me that sense of security and belongingness.
The tinikling dance is one of the most dramatic dances in the Philippines. It is named after the long-legged tickling bird. Now we will clap to the rhythm in this manner. Listen carefully to a 3/4 rhythm.
I think the core definition of Philippine folk dance is that it's a dance of the people. It is not a classical dance because it is not a highly codified form. So these dances really are reflective of the lives of the Filipinos, whether they're doing rituals, courtship, occupational. So these dances are very much inextricably linked with who they are in their everyday existence, but also during special occasions. For folk dance to be really folk, it has to be reflective of the people who practice the dance. And my sense is that Philippine folk dance has always been seen as dances of the past. And I've always questioned that. I think the mere fact that it's folk has to also reflect contemporary identities. And so I have decided, as the artistic director, to invite dancers who are non-Filipinos and to give them the opportunity to actually bring in their own interpretation of these pieces. So for example, there's one dancer who is not of Filipino descent, okay, and is trained in ballet. Dario is his name, so I said, Dario, I said, for this particular section, what can you bring into the piece? Because this is the improv part. Well, you know what, I could do a split jump, a Russian split jump. And I said, by all means, you do that. I think folk dance, at least because it's here that I'm doing it, should not only be embodied by Filipinos, but should also be embodied by Canadians of different ethnicities. Because Filipinos here exist within a very complexly rich multicultural environment.
Ready, go, and one. Papiya tatu, papa, tata, tatiya tata, tati, tata, tatiya tat, stop. Very good. Exactly right.
Certain pieces, it's very clear in the research and in the way that it's taught in the Philippines and passed on from generation to generation, that there are certain basic elements, basic footwork, there are core elements in the dances that represent what the dance is. I believe that those elements should stay. But at the same time, I also believe that research has to be ongoing, you see. That if you have researched, let's say, a Blaan dance in 1980, I think in 2016 or in 2017, somebody should go back there and see what's happening there. Because culture obviously changes through time. So what I'm trying to say is that I believe in fluidity. It is my responsibility to, number one, give them the context of the dance. This dance is called banga, which means pots. This is an occupational dance. It was first researched by Ramon Busan, and so I give them a history. And according to him, this is what happened. Okay? So imagine that you are walking going towards the river, and then the path is not straight, but the path actually is almost sinuous. So you have to move with that, imagining that natural environment, or that environment where they actually carry pots towards that river. And now when you get to the river, there's a moment where they actually take a bath, or they bathe themselves, or they wash their extremities. So how do you do that, right? How do you do that? And then how do you actually wash your hair, mimicking that washing of the hair by the river with the pots, right? Because you have to scoop the pots to the river, to that imagined water, and then you have to pour the water into your body, right? It's not like a shower where you just choose hot and cold or whatever. But here you have to do it like this, right? But in the context of a dance, right? It is not like this. But in a context of the way that we understand Philippine folk dance to be staged. So there are these teachable moments where, in a way, you bring the dancers here in Toronto back to the Philippines. Filipinos, even though they live in Canada, do not necessarily have to just be working in Canada. I really think that transnationalism, and I hope that that's what's going to define me. That's why all my summers are in the Philippines. All my breaks are spent in the Philippines, because for me to understand Filipino culture and Filipino culture in the Canadian diaspora, I think I have to be transnationally active. And so in the Philippines, I hope that my work will demonstrate and will partner Filipino colleagues there to look at the power of anthropological work in dance. And it's not just parachute work. I mean, I'm an ethnographer, so I am so passionate about one's commitment to the field. So, for example, if you're working on the dance called Subli, you have to live with that community, understand why it is a ritual, understand why I've not done work on it, I've just read about it, but understand what folk Catholicism is for that particular community. My work is on Ati-Atihan, so the way that I understand folk Catholicism in my hometown in Kalibo, Aklan, is what I articulated. But you see, Catholicism is folklorized or Filipinized, and I think that's where the agency and the power of the Filipinos come in, is for the scholarship to be able to show that, hey, you know what, Filipinos have the ability to actually take ownership of these forms that are coming from outside, and to take ownership of these forms and make sense of these forms through dance. And that's, I think, is a crux of my work. I've always questioned the linking of dance to only entertainment. I thought that that's not enough. I really thought that there must be some kind of scholarship that underpin these dances, and it should, because as an English major, I would read novels and short stories, and there would be like a theoretical linkages to these texts. And I said, why can't we do that to dance? Why can't we link tinikling to issues around nationalism? Why can't we link our Spanish dances to colonialism? I mean, those are very rich texts or cultural phenomena that also speak to these broader issues that are so critical for any society. Embodying this is one step, but articulating it in a scholarly fashion should be the next step. I hope that my contribution will be to further define who the Filipinos are through folk forms, because that is such a powerful and potent expression of a culture, is folk traditions. And I think if these folk traditions are taught in a very nuanced way, in a way that includes contextualization, in a way that includes careful research. Hopefully, that's what I'm going to demonstrate in Luz Viminda. I think that Filipinos will really have a more secure sense of who they are, and hopefully will continue to be proud that they're Filipinos, even though they're already here in the diaspora.